Assalamu alaikum. In this video, I will answer the following questions. What is defensive jihad? And what is offensive jihad? Did Islam spread by the sword? What are the war rules in Islam? Are Muslims trying to take over the whole world and make us pay jizya? Did people in the past convert to Islam to avoid paying jizya? Is everyone in danger as long as Muslims exist? And finally, did Islam allow freedom of religion? Last month I uploaded this video, Violence and Jihad in Islam Part 1, where I debunked many of the Islamophobic claims regarding the violence in the Quran and the Hadith. If you missed it, I really recommend you go watch it first and then come back here to Part 2. Link is in the description. But if you did already, then get ready, bring your coffee, and let's start. After all these years of Islamophobia propaganda, being a Muslim in the public perception, at least in a lot of countries, means being guilty of violence, or at least you will be accused of it and you will be expected to defend yourself. It is unfortunate that their propaganda against Islam worked. But what I consider really a real disaster is the response of some Muslims that I found online. Those cute Muslims starting spreading the idea that jihad is only for self-defense. We are so nice, we only defend ourselves, please love us. Yeah, that's really sad. Maybe they did that with good intentions due to their lack of knowledge, I don't know. But what I know for sure is that this is just pathetic. Jihad is not exclusive to self-defense. These are the types of jihad, and I will explain each one of them for you. Type number 1, the defensive jihad. You know, the type that the cute Muslims are referring to as the only type. Allah said, fight in the cause of Allah only against those who wage war against you. But do not transgress, Allah does not like the transgressors. You know, defend against the invaders, but you don't invade yourself. Clear, right? Then Allah said, if the enemy inclined towards peace, make peace with them. Basically, if they stopped attacking you, invading you, whatever, don't take revenge on them or hold grudges. They stopped, so you forgive and accept their peace. But this is not the only type of jihad as those cute Muslims were claiming. Stick with me so I can read for you the remaining types. Type number 2, protecting the oppressed. See this 50-year-old woman, for example? Last year, those criminals that we are not allowed to talk about sent a trained military dog on her in her house to force her out of her house. This is a scene that every Muslim on earth from Canada to Indonesia will be asked about. Allah said, what is the matter with you? That you fight not in the cause of Allah and for the oppressed among men, women, and children who say, our Lord, take us out of this city of oppressive people and appoint for us from yourself a protector and appoint for us from yourself a helper. Not long time ago, at the time of Al-Mu'tasim, one Muslim woman was taken as a prisoner by the Romans in Turkey. While she was being tortured in the Roman prison, she was saying, Wa Mu'tasimeh. She was shouting and calling out the name of the leaders of the Muslims back then, Al-Mu'tasim. When he got the news about this woman, he immediately called for jihad all over the Muslim world. He prepared an army of 200,000 soldiers and completely removed all the Romans from this city, the city that the woman was imprisoned in. See both of those two Muslim women? They are in the same situation. The only difference is the Muslim leaders are not the same. Type number 3, mediating between brothers. Allah said, if two groups of believers fight each other, two groups of Muslims, then you should make peace between them. But if one of them decided to transgress against the other, then fight against the transgressing group until they are willing to submit to the rule of Allah. If they do so, then make peace between both groups in all fairness and act justly. Surely Allah loves those who uphold justice. This is a type of jihad that is related to Muslims transgressing against other Muslims. Then type number 4, it's called da'wah, or inviting people to Islam. Allah said, had we been willing, we could have easily sent a warner to every society. However, Allah willed that Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, be sent as a final messenger for all people of the earth until the day of resurrection. The verse introduces the obligation of da'wah on every Muslim. Allah decided not to send a warner to every society. Instead, He is ordering us, you and me, to go deliver His message to everyone on earth. Allah said, do not obey the disbelievers and do great jihad against them with the Quran. See this part? Jihad with the Quran? Yes. This is the jihad of delivering the Quran to everybody that you can reach. If a man is living in a very faraway island, never heard about the words of Allah, you and I will be asked about him on the day of judgment. Why didn't you try to deliver the words of Allah to him? And when you are asked this question, you need to show that you at least tried. This is why I'm doing all of these videos on YouTube. And this is why you should do the same like me, or at least help out with your shares and engagement. The Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, said, do jihad against the disbelievers with your money, yourselves, and your tongues. See this part in the end? Do jihad with your tongues. This is what we refer to as da'wah. Imam Ibn al-Qayyim once said, there are two types of jihad. The easy jihad, the jihad that everyone does, and the hard jihad, which is the jihad with evidence and debates. The second one is superior because its great benefit and its difficulty and the abundance of its opponents. Now the type of jihad you are waiting for. Type number 5, the offensive jihad. Yes, there is offensive jihad. There is a condition in which Muslims are actually obligated to attack another country. It's one condition though. The condition of the suppression of freedom of speech. Let me explain. To understand this in today's language, let's take North Korea, for example. According to Prison Insider, there are those people who got jailed for life just because they were caught reading the Bible. This is a government that does not allow its citizens to explore religions. They don't allow their people to read and learn and understand and make their educated decisions afterwards. No. They are forced to be disbelievers, or, if you read, you go to jail. A typical person who lives in this area, he is not allowed to read about Islam or Christianity or Judaism or any other things. He is in an intellectual prison. In that specific case, offensive jihad becomes an obligation. Not to force people in North Korea to become Muslims, no. To remove the government that is forcing them to be disbelievers and preventing them from, having access to knowledge, and to give them a chance to read and learn and understand and then make their own decision about their own religion. We are obligated to give everyone access to the words of Allah and then let him make his own decision. If someone is prevented from this access, here it is called for offensive jihad. Got it? Let me give you another example just to make sure you don't misunderstand me. This is our brother Sheikh Osman Farouk. In the US, the government allows him to stand on the street, talk to people about Allah, and give them free copy of the Quran. In that case, there is no offensive jihad needed. Why? Because those people have a chance to take a free copy of the Quran, and that is our obligation. If they get the free copy, we don't really care if they believe in it or not. My job is to give you the free copy, right? But if the government in a parallel universe decided that no, it is illegal to give people a free copy of the Quran and it is illegal to preach publicly, here we will have a problem. When Allah said there shall be no compulsion in religion, that works both ways. You might think it means Muslims don't force anyone to accept your religion. Yes, but it also means oppressive governments don't force your citizens to become disbelievers and prevent them from reading the words of Allah. There shall be no compulsion from both sides. So Muslims will not force Islam on them, but you also don't force disbelief on them. Let them be free to choose. This is the whole point of life, is a test to see if they're gonna choose willingly to be believers or disbelievers. So taking away their freedom defies the purpose of this whole life. Finally, we have the self-jihad. Allah said, and those who do jihad for us, we will surely guide them to our ways. This is the jihad against our desires, our struggle against ourselves to make good habits and to stop bad ones. And this is the greatest jihad ever. When the Sahaba, the students of the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, came back home after a battle, they said, we came back from the minor jihad to the major jihad. The minor jihad here means war, and the major jihad here means struggling against ourselves to become, better people. By the way, this specific hadith I quoted here is not fully authenticated, but its meaning is correct because it exists in many different sources. When we say that in Islam, sometimes war becomes a must, some people associate the teachings of Islam to the teachings of the Bible for some reason. I'm talking mostly about Christians and specifically ex-Christians because they ran away from Christianity because of verses like slaughter old men and young men and women and mothers and children, or like this verse, put to death men and women, children, infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. These genocidal verses, like this one for example, their little ones shall be dashed to the ground and pregnant women bellies shall be ripped open. We covered this topic in detail, by the way, in this video, The Bible's Dark Side Part 1. I will leave a link to it in the description below. Anyway, those ex-Christians, when they hear the word war, and they hear it in a religious text, in our case here Islam, in their imagination, in their head, they immediately make the assumption that, if there is a word war in a religious book, that means it is as bad and as barbaric and as genocidal as the teachings of the Bible. I understand why they imagine that given, their history, but assumption is a very bad thing. Assumption only leads to ignorance. And let me show you how the war rules in Islam are completely different, like night and day. Read with me. The Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, said, when you are in war, do not kill an old man. Do not kill a kid. Do not kill a woman. Allah loves those who are good doers. Allah said in Surah At-Tawbah, during war, if one of your enemies, that is a soldier by the way, asks for your protection, grant him the protection. And then let him hear the words of Allah. And then, listen to this, escort him to his place of safety. That is a combatant, by the way, that is a soldier. Escort him to his place of safety. That is just because he asked for protection. The Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, said, whoever kills a non-Muslim peaceful civilian will never enter paradise or smell its fragrance. Paradise is what Christians call heaven or whatever. The Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, said, in war, do not kill a woman or a non-combatant. That is, in today's language, do not kill civilians. The first Caliphate, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, said, in war, do not kill a woman or a kid or an old man. Do not cut a tree. Do not destroy houses. Do not kill any animal, except if, you need it to eat or something. Do not burn gardens, and don't be cowards. Allah said in Surah An-Nahl, if you decide to retaliate, then let it be equivalent to what you have suffered, never more. But if you patiently endure, it is certainly best for those who are patient. Translation, if you are wronged, you can make equivalent retaliation, but not more. But you know what? As a suggestion, it is better if you forgive. I understand that this is not what you have heard about Islam all your life. This is not what they want you to believe. This is why I'm giving you reference to everything I say, just, for you to make sure that I'm not lying after you finish watching the video. In the next video, inshallah, Violence and Jihad in Islam Part 3, I will tell you why your media is lying to you about Islam. I will talk about that in detail. I will tell you about their motives, and I will also discuss those weird groups who appeared lately, who do not follow the rules put by the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, and doing very bad actions in the name of Islam for some reason. I will tell you why were they made, and who funded them, and why they are doing that exactly. Subscribe so you won't miss it. Did Islam spread by the sword? Yeah, the famous question that no one actually ever asked in whole history before the invention of Hollywood. After they spread this made-up story about Islam spreading by the sword and by invading people and forcing them to revert or pay jizya, even though the story is completely made up and doesn't exist in any history book, they kept repeating it in every media outlet they own until people actually believed it. Even young Muslims today, they started to believe it, subhanallah. Anyway, before I debunk this myth, let me first remind you of a rule that we established in this chapter, Types of Jihad. The rule was, there shall be no compulsion in religion, and that applies on both sides, which means Muslims should not force others to accept Islam, but that also applies to the other government. They shall not force people to disbelieve, or in other words, they shall not prevent people from learning about Islam and other religions. The key word here is خلوا بيني وبين الناس. Let me speak to people. Let me talk to people about God publicly without worrying about police putting me in jail. My job as a Muslim is to deliver the message to everyone. So will you allow me to stand in your streets and talk to random people in the street about God and give them a free copy of the Quran and then go home safely? Or will you consider that a crime? Delivering the message of Islam is an obligation on me. I have to do it, and I do it for free. And after I give someone a copy of the Quran, I don't really care if he accepts it or not. I did my job. I did my delivery. So all I'm asking for is freedom of speech. If there is an oppressive ruler that forbids freedom of speech and stops a peaceful man from preaching in public, then this will lead to war, and this is called offensive jihad. The war is not to force people to be Muslim. The war is to give people the freedom to learn, to discover, and to make their own educated decisions. So, did Islam spread by the sword? Let's give a definitive, undisputable answer to this question once and for all. Muslims, for sure, in history fought a lot of wars, yes. But also, it's a fact that there has been no compulsion in religion. No one was forced to be Muslim. To understand these two statements together, we need some details. Let's talk about the first generation of Muslims. This is where most of the wars happened. We are talking about a time when the Roman and the Persian emperors didn't really allow any random man from another country to come preach about God there. The emperors felt that people being loyal and slaves to God instead of them will ruin their thrones, The emperors wouldn't really allow someone to preach to people that everyone is equal. There is no masters and peasants and slaves. Everyone is equal. That will ruin their social order. The emperors kept their civilians in an intellectual prison that dictated what they can and can't learn. Remember when we took North Korea as an example? Now imagine all of those people who lived in all of this land in the Persian Empire and all of this land in the Roman Empire, all of them being prevented from learning about God. And because Muslims are obligated to deliver the message, the Muslim army did not rest until they made sure that everyone in all of this area at least got a copy of the Quran to, read the words of God and make a decision for himself. Those people finally got the freedom to read and explore and make their own decisions after they were freed from the oppressive rulers. Those people could learn about Islam and other religions during the Muslim rule only. They heard the words of Allah, understood it, and some of them decided to believe it, and some of them decided not to believe it. And because we don't have compulsion in religion, those who decided to disbelieve in it were free to practice their religion, as long as, they got the message, our job is done. If they believe or not believe, it is not our concern as Muslims. Does that mean that they were forced to become Muslims? Or does that mean that they were freed from those who were forcing them to become disbelievers? Now someone will make a stupid claim. He will tell me, yes, they were not directly physically forced, but they were incentivized to believe in Islam to avoid paying jizya, And this is their second lie that they also made up, that doesn't exist in any history book. They try to paint the picture in front of you as follows. A man was given a choice between paying a lot of money in jizya taxes or being a Muslim and, saving his money for himself. And on the contrary, in reality, the man was choosing between paying the jizya tax or being Muslim and paying the zakat tax. Not only that, and participating in the army. And by the way, zakah was more than jizya. So look at the difference with me. Which is easier from a materialistic point of view? A small tax plus no compulsory military service? Or a big tax plus compulsory military service? The disbeliever actually had a better materialistic life. But you know what? Those people actually chose the second one, the harder choice, because they believed in their creator. By the way, jizya is only on grown-up men who are capable of military service, but they are not doing it. There is no jizya on women, or on children, or old men, or even unhealthy men. While zakah, the Muslim tax, is on everybody. Anybody that has money. That includes women and old men and the unhealthy men. Jizya was a flat payment, while zakah was a percentage of your whole wealth. Also, by the way, jizya was refunded if the Muslims were unable to defend the Christians from their enemies. So it was in exchange of something. It was not like, give us your money. And that is the definition of taxes. You pay taxes and you're expected to get services in exchange, right? Anyway, if you combine all of these facts, you will see with your eyes that it was much easier and simpler for a family to be disbelievers. The moment you become Muslim, you pay more and you do military service. But again, those people chose to pay more and to do harder tasks and harder obligations because they believed in their creator. See how they twisted history? These are two ancient books that were documenting the history of Amr ibn al-As. Amr ibn al-As was the leader of the Muslim army that opened most of North Africa. Both books talk about the jizya that was on the Egyptians as follows. 2 dinars per year for every healthy non-Muslim male. 0 dinars on the females, 0 dinars on the kids, 0 dinars on old men, and 0 dinars on the unhealthy. Basically, 2 dinars per whole family, whole year. That is nothing if you compare it to what you would have paid as zakah as a Muslim. Amr ibn al-As collected a total of 12 million dinars in jizya in his first year. But this is not the important part. The important part is in the previous year when, Egypt was ruled by the Christian emperor, he collected from the same people 20 million dinars. That is nearly double. But, no one talks about that. And before I finish the topic of jizya, Some people actually argue that the idea of tax in itself is wrong and immoral or whatever. And the problem is when you tell them, don't you pay taxes in your country? Doesn't your government take money from you in exchange for, protection and services and stuff? And they're like, no, our government is bad and Jesus is love and Jesus would never allow taxes and all of that, stupid claims, blah, blah, blah. I know it's ridiculous, but I will take a minute to let the Bible respond to them instead of me responding to them. Open Romans 13. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. Whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted. By the way, this was Paul's letter to Romans. They were under a pagan emperor, but anyway. So, see this pagan emperor? Yeah, his authority is established by God, so you should obey him. Anyway, the point is, this is also why you pay taxes. Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. See the word here, taxes, in the verse? If you open with me the Arabic official Bible, the Bible made by the Arabic Church, you will find the same word here in verse 7 written this way. Jizya. Give everyone what you owe them. If you owe jizya, pay jizya. Subhanallah. Anyway, let's go back to the spreading by the sword claim. Let me give you some examples to show you how freedom of religion was exercised in the first generation. This is Saint Catherine Monastery. It is located in Sinai, Egypt, and till today, it is a very important location for the Egyptian Christians. It is there, by the way, no one destroyed it after 1,000 years of, Muslim rule. But anyways, this is not the point. The point is, we found a document inside it, a covenant from the Prophet himself to all Christians in opened land. This is the covenant. I will translate some of it for you. In the name of Allah, the most merciful, from Mohamed ibn Abdullah to all people. I am here to give you the good news and the warnings from your God. Let's go to the important part. No bishop or monk shall be removed from his monastery, nor a hermit from his cell, nor a wanderer from his wandering, nor shall any of their churches or synagogues be demolished, nor any of the buildings of their churches be used in a construction of a mosque, nor in the homes of the Muslims. Whoever does any of that has broken the covenant of God and has disobeyed his messenger. No tax or fine shall be imposed on monks, bishops, or anyone who worships, and I will preserve them wherever they are, on land or on sea, east, west, north, south, whatever. They are under my protection, my covenant and my protection from all harm. Another example. The Caliphate Umar ibn al-Khattab wrote a covenant for the people who lived in Palestine. The content of this covenant is well documented. He said, "This is what gave the servant of God Umar, commander of the believers, security to the people of Elijah." He liked to call the people of the book people of Elijah. He gave them security for themselves, their money, their churches, their crosses, and the rest of their faith. Their churches shall not be inhabited, destroyed, or diminished, nor from their space, nor from their cross, nor from any of their money, and they shall not be forced to change their religion, and none of them shall be harmed. Can you see how these documents debunk all the lies the media has been feeding you all your life? I understand if you doubt what I'm saying now, but in the end it is the exact opposite of what they want you to believe. But you know what? Stay tuned with me. I will show you a lot of historical evidence for everything that I said. They tell you that the Arabs invaded all of these areas, half of Africa, half of Asia, and parts of Europe, and converted everyone there to Islam by the sword. Let me tell you how funny this claim is. The army of the Muslims by the end of the life of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, was 10,000 men. These 10,000 men lived in a very, very, very small area inside the Arabian Peninsula, and they were surrounded by their enemies, i.e. the pagan Arabs. So their claim is, those 10,000 men who had, 10,000 swords, they overpowered all the Arabian pagan armies. Wait, I'm not finished. And then they overpowered the mighty army of the Persian Empire. Look at it. This Persian Empire, who had hundreds of thousands of soldiers and military equipment, they defeated all of them with 10,000 swords. And then, not then. And meanwhile, at the same time, they also defeated the mighty Roman Empire. See, this Roman Empire, who also had, hundreds of thousands of soldiers and military equipment. Same 10,000 swords, they defeated all of them. And meanwhile, at the same time, they invaded all of these countries that you can see on the map with the same 10,000 swords, right, at the same time, and forced every one of them to accept Islam. And all of that happened in the lifetime of one generation. 10,000 swords versus the whole world. And, they won. This is like claiming that a group of men from Nigeria today suddenly fought and defeated the American and the Russian army together at the same time and invaded half of the world at the same time, defeating every government there and forced everyone to accept Islam. All of that happened in like 30, 40 years. Make sense? How about you tell this claim to a 10-year-old kid and see whether he will believe you or laugh at you? If you're gonna come up with a lie, at least make it believable. How come 10,000 swords alone defeat the two world superpowers back then, along with all the smaller forces of the smaller societies all over Africa, Asia, and parts of Europe, all of that in the lifetime of one generation? It doesn't make sense even to an idiot. So let's forget about the stories they made up and actually open a real history book and find out what really happened. Let's take the Muslim opening of Egypt, for example. Their fake story about the opening of Egypt is Amr ibn al-As, the leader of the Muslim army, took 4,000 soldiers and invaded Egypt, forced every Egyptian to become Muslim, and meanwhile he destroyed the culture and the religion of the ancient Egyptians. The culture of the pharaohs and all of that. You know what the problem is with their fake story? In reality, Amr ibn al-As, the leader of the Muslim army, never fought against any Egyptian at all. At all. Not even 1 second. The whole story is a lie. First of all, the culture and the religion and the language of the ancient Egyptians was completely gone 1,000 years before Amr ibn al-As was even born. 1,000 years gap. They just ignored it as if it doesn't exist. Second of all, at that time, Egypt was under the brutal invasion of the Romans. You know the Romans, right? The Romans who had a long history of persecuting pagans and persecuting even Christians, but those who had different beliefs about the nature of Jesus. The Romans who invaded all of these lands, massacred, tortured their people, and forced their trinity on them. By the way, you might know them as the Eastern Romans or the Byzantines. I will just refer to them here in this video as Romans. Anyway, at that time, Egyptians had a lot of different beliefs. There were pagan Egyptians, there were Unitarian Christians, there were Arians, there were Trinitarians, and a lot of quote-unquote heretic groups. All of those people lived under the Roman rule. But the problem with Romans was they didn't really allow freedom of religion. They persecuted and forced every Egyptian to accept the Roman version of Christianity. This book is called Tarikh Masr li Yohanna Naqyusi. The author was a famous Egyptian Christian bishop and historian. This is one of the books that is still being taught by the Egyptian church today to the Egyptian Christians. In it, he talked about the history of the Egyptian church, the Coptic church, And he talked about the persecution of the Romans to the Egyptian Christians and how they suffered a lot because they didn't want to change their beliefs about the nature of Jesus. If you skip forward to page 190, you will find him writing about how the Egyptian Christians had a different understanding regarding the nature of Jesus than the one the Romans had, and how that led to Romans persecuting Egyptian Christians to force convert them. The leader of the Egyptian church back then was called Bishop Benjamin. He had to flee away to avoid death, and he asked his Christian Egyptian followers to fight along with the Muslims together against the Romans. See this twist here? Egyptian Christians fighting together with the Muslims, together on one side, against the Romans on the other side. They were claiming that Muslims were fighting the Egyptians, but the history book here is saying Egyptians and the Muslims together on one side were fighting the Romans. Wait, I'm not done. Then if you skip forward to page 220, the author says, after the Muslims helped the Christians defend themselves against the, bad Romans, finally the Bishop Benjamin, the leader of the Christians, could only come out from his hiding. He went back safely to Alexandria and visited all of his churches. The Muslims gave him his churches back after he was hiding for 13 years in the desert from the Romans. The Muslims finally gave them back their freedom to practice their religion, after it was taken away from them by the Romans. Keep reading. Amr ibn al-As didn't take any money from the church. He didn't commit any crime or any oppression against the Christians. Under the rule of Amr ibn al-As, the church leaders rebuilt their churches that were, destroyed by the Romans. Does the story make sense now? Can you see the difference between real history and the made-up stories they keep feeding you in their media? Amr ibn al-As never fought against any Egyptian, not even for 1 second. He fought along with the Egyptians against the Romans. Now let's talk about what happened after the Romans were removed. When Islamophobes today hear the word Muslim army in Egypt, they automatically assume it was something like the Roman army, where, you invade a country to kill everyone and force your religion on them and steal their money. The Western culture of invasion. So they say, yeah, Muslim army in another country, voila, it's an invasion like, the British and the French and all of these criminals. They assume that Egyptians back then were being persecuted to accept Islam or something. Another Roman army, but, instead of forcing the Trinity on them, forcing Islam on them. This is what's going on in their heads. And I understand why they think that, because this is their whole history. Especially Western European countries. They invaded most of the world. And they stole all of their wealth and resources and they enslaved them. So it makes sense that in their head, the word army means, something like the British army. But let me show you the difference. Do you know what Amr ibn al-As did right after the war against the Romans in Egypt? Do you think he took the Egyptian land and houses and resources for himself? He took his 4,000 army men and he went out of Egyptian cities to avoid disturbing the landowners, the Egyptians. He went out in the desert and he chose a place that was completely empty and he built houses for him and his men there. This place still exists today. It is called Al-Fustat. He left the land of the Egyptians to them. He left them and their homes alone. He gave them complete freedom to choose any religion they wanted to practice. But he also gave them the freedom to read, explore, and learn about God. Egyptians finally had freedom to read several religious books and compare them, and they finally had access to the Quran. And if you think when they read the Quran they immediately became Muslims, you're wrong. The majority of Egyptians didn't really become Muslims until 300 years later. 300 years later, when they finally understood the teachings of Islam and willingly decided that this is the truth from their creator. If he was forcing them to accept Islam, they would have been Muslims right away, not after 300 years, right? He simply couldn't do that because Allah said, no compulsion in religion. Got it? See this part of North Africa? The people who lived there were called Al-Barbar. They were also being persecuted by the Romans, by the way. Their leader sent a letter to Amr ibn al-As asking him for help. He asked him to join him against the Romans. He was basically saying, well, you helped the Egyptians free themselves, right? What about us? Muslims helped a lot of people to gain their freedom from those who were forcing the Trinity on them. Muslims gave them the freedom to finally read and learn and make an educated decision. Then hundreds of years later, most of those people willingly became Muslim. Years of freedom of religion, years of availability of information, and this is the important part, availability of information. No one was dictating what they can and can't learn. No one was persecuting them because, they had a different understanding of the nature of Jesus. That was how the Romans functioned, not us. And then if you skip forward 1300 years later in the future, Egypt today still has over 10 million Christians left and 3,000 churches according to the official government newsletter. If Muslims didn't allow freedom of religion, how come they didn't destroy all of these 3,000 churches in the past 1,000 years of Muslim rule? According to BBC, Egypt just opened the Middle East's biggest cathedral near Cairo. And by the way, not only Christians, even pagan temples in Egypt were not destroyed by Muslims. See, they exist all over Egypt till today. Why didn't they destroy them? You know why? Because God said there shall be no compulsion in religion. So how can anyone fit all of these references and this news with their made-up narrative? Doesn't make any sense. The oldest churches in the world are in Palestine. You know the land of Palestine? The land that was ruled by Muslims for 1,400 years? 1,400 years is enough time for anyone who wants to destroy a church to actually do it. 1,400 years of Muslim rule and of freedom of religion. These churches still exist. They didn't destroy it. Of course, that was before the British invaded and stole it and then decided to give it as a present to other people who also came from Europe. You know, the infamous promise from someone who doesn't own the land to someone who doesn't deserve it? I don't care. My point now is, more than 1,000 years is enough time for anyone who wants to destroy a church to actually do it. How much time do you need to take a shovel and remove a building? But the Muslims didn't, because Allah said, no compulsion in religion. See this church? It is called Kanisat al-Qiyamah, or you might know it with this name. When the church leader invited the Caliphate Umar ibn al-Khattab to pray inside it, Umar responded saying, I would do it, but I am worried that if I pray inside the church today, maybe in the future some ignorant Muslim will say, Umar prayed here, therefore we have to turn it into a mosque. So for the safety of the future Christians, it is better if I don't. Do you think this was a man who was trying to force them to convert to Islam by the sword? Spain was ruled by Muslims for 800 years. 800 years. That is more than double the whole history of the US. During those 800 years, they didn't force convert people. It actually stayed a majority Christian society. But you know what happened when the Christians ruled Spain? Yeah, of course you know. They made the unfortunate Spanish Inquisition when they were going house by house and giving people the choice between conversion and death. This is the difference. Muslims didn't do that even when they had the power to. Do you know why? Because Allah said, no compulsion in religion. According to the Times of India, trade, not invasion, brought Islam to India. Keep reading. Most historians now agree that India's introduction to Islam was through Arab traders and not Muslim invaders, as it is generally believed. By the way, Muslims ruled India for more than 500 years, and yet it is still majority disbelievers. Why didn't the Muslim ruler force people to convert by the sword? Why didn't the Muslim ruler make a Spanish Inquisition in India? You know why? Because Allah said, no compulsion in religion. He can't force them to convert. They decided to be disbelievers. He let them. Indonesia, Malaysia. Which Muslim army went there? Ever in history, which Muslim army went to Malaysia? None. Not even one man with one donkey with a mini sword. Nothing. Yet, Malaysia became a Muslim country. How did Indonesia become a Muslim country? According to the US Department of State, 87% of the population in Indonesia identifies as Muslim. So which sword forced them to revert? You know what? Let's cut it short. There is only one religion in the whole world that actually spread by the sword. If you want to know which religion was it, just read the history of Cuba. Just Cuba. Or you know what? Read the history of Mexico. The poor people of the Maya had it coming. I can't really talk about whole history of several countries here, but I can give you a hint and you will understand when you read about it. You have two types of verses in the Bible. The first type is verses like, let's say, Exodus 22:20. He who sacrifices to any god except to the Lord only, he shall be utterly destroyed. And you have the second type of verses, the nice verses like Matthew 5:44. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. All you need to do to successfully invade, destroy, and steal a whole nation is to preach the first verse to your army men and the second verse to the people you are trying to steal. The army men, when they read this type of verses, they will be filled with hate and willing to kill anything that breathes. And the victims that you're trying to invade and kill and steal, send your preachers to them and preach for them the other type of Christianity, which is, if they come, you give them the other cheek. Don't defend yourself against your enemies, love your enemies, blah, blah, blah. You know what? Read about the Saxon tribes in South England and how they were forced into Christianity. Or read about the history of Norway. Read about the King Olaf and how he used forced conversion through means such as exile, hostage-taking, mutilation, torture, and death for those who refused to convert to Christianity, as well as destroying pagan temples. Read about the history of Denmark. Read about how Harald probably thought it was a good political move to become Christian in order to avoid war with the Holy Roman Empire. You know what? If we don't become Christians, these guys will just kill all of us. So let's just, give up and do it. Read about the history of Lithuania and how the Lithuanian Crusade was a series of campaigns that forcibly Christianize the whole pagan country. Forcibly. Read about the history of all the colonized African countries, or South American countries. Read any of the history of any Christian country. Even Rome itself, the first Christian country. Read what happened after the Council of Nicaea. Read about the Theodosian decree. Today, those Christians and ex-Christians, when they hear that Islam sometimes allows war in specific situations, in their head, they automatically assume that, if Islam allows war in specific situation, that means that they are like us. No, in reality, it is like black and white. See this man? This is a man that most probably you never heard about. He is a very humble ex-Hindu, and he spent his whole life until he became very, very old talking to people about Allah. Till now, he converted more than 100,000 people and counting. Where is the sword in his hand? Look at him. Can you see a sword in his hand? I can't. You know what? This is Dr. Zakir Naik. He converted literally millions, and yet I still can't see a sword in his hand. Can you see it? The bottom line is, if you are preaching the truth from your Creator, you don't really need the mighty Roman emperor to kill everyone who doesn't obey.
Hey ChatGPT, I have a question. Historically, who was more violent and killed more in the name of God? Islam or Christianity? Can you please answer in one sentence?
Hi, Lily J. That's a complex question. But historically, Christianity, through events like the Crusades, Inquisition, European colonization, and forced conversions, has been estimated to have caused around 10 times more deaths in the name of God compared to Islam.
Are you actually serious right now? I am sick of this propaganda.
There are 3 videos that you have to watch to fully grasp the difference between the Islamic and the Christian history. First is slavery in Islam, second is Islamic Golden Age, and third is the Bible's dark side. Those videos will open your eyes to a whole new history that your media is lying to you about. These videos will change your life. Links are in the description. Allah said in Surah Al-Kahf, deliver the message of truth to all people. Then, whoever wants to believe, let him believe. And whoever wants to disbelieve, let him disbelieve. What? Let him disbelieve? Yes. It is a command from Allah Himself. Let him disbelieve. But take care if you complete the verse until the end. It says, after you give them freedom to disbelieve now in this life, in the hereafter they will go to hell. It's not all rainbows and butterflies. The point is, in this life, let everyone make his own choice. With complete freedom, don't interfere in it. The reward and the punishment is not now. The reward and the punishment is in the hereafter, not in dunya. One day, a group of Christians from Najran visited the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him. If you are watching Western media, you would assume that the Prophet killed them or something. But on the contrary, the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, invited them to stay inside his mosque for 40 days. There is also a narration in the book of Ibn al-Qayyim, Zad al-Ma'ad, specifically part 3, page 550. It says, when it was time for their prayer, they wanted to pray the Christian prayer inside the Prophet's mosque. Muslims didn't like that idea, but the Prophet said, Da'uhum, let them pray inside the mosque. This part of the narration is not fully authenticated though. Another day, a group of pagans from Thaqif visited the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him. Again, if you're watching Western media, you would assume he killed them or something. On the contrary, the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, invited them for a meeting inside his mosque. That is reported in Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya Ibn Kathir, the 5th part. Another day, the Prophet's Jewish neighbor had a kid, and the kid became sick. Can you imagine what happened? When the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, knew about the sickness of the Jewish kid, he went to him, to his house, and visited him. That is, by the way, in this hadith in Al-Bukhari. These examples show how the Prophet coexisted with his pagan, Christian, and Jewish neighbors. Allah said to his Prophet in Surah Al-Ghashiyah, your task is to remind them only. That's it. You are not to force them to believe. Allah said to his Prophet in Surah Qaf, we know best what the disbelievers say, and you, O Prophet, are not there to force them to believe. No. You only remind with the Quran those who fear my warning. That's it. Allah said to his Prophet in Surah Yunus, don't try to force them to believe. If I wanted to force everybody to believe, I will make all humanity believers. In other words, I, God, want people to have free will. I want them to freely choose to obey me, not to be forced to obey me. So don't force them. That is not my will. And to summarize all of that, Allah said in Surah Al-Baqarah, the truth is clear and falsehood is clear. Let there be no compulsion in religion. The freedom question should never be asked to Muslims. The freedom question should only be asked about those who are pretending to have freedom even though they didn't even smell its fragrance. In a lot of quote-unquote European free countries today, you can get detained or worse if you just say your opinion about a specific behavior that some colorful people do. Can you freely talk about them? Just saying out loud what you think, or even quoting verses from the Quran or from the Bible about the colorful people will get you in a lot of trouble. In a lot of quote-unquote free European countries today, if you talk about the worst mass murder crime that we ever witnessed, the ones that happened in 2023 and 2024 in the Middle East, you can get in huge trouble. You might be jailed, you might be deported, and if you are lucky enough, you just will lose your job and your future opportunities. Even here on YouTube, I can't really talk about them, otherwise I might get cancelled or shadow banned like they did to me several times before. Those people are above the law. Talking about them is not included in the freedom of speech claims. In the quote-unquote free country of Canada, a father was jailed just because he called his daughter a girl. How dare you call your daughter a girl? In the quote-unquote free France, the government is taking away every girl's right to choose what to wear and what not to wear. The quote-unquote free government of France is preventing girls from wearing headscarves by force. This 15-year-old girl had to shave her head to avoid the headscarf ban forced by the government on her. Also check this report on The Guardian. I felt violated by the demand to undress. In the quote-unquote free Sweden, there are thousands of children who were taken away from their parents just because their parents taught their girls not to wear bikinis in a mixed school swimming pool. Imagine being a parent who is given a choice between asking your daughter to strip half naked in front of men or taking her away from you forever. I don't even know which is worse. Either you let your daughter be a public toilet for the desires of every random man in her area, or we will take her away from you by force and give her to another family who will make her a public toilet for the desire of every man in her area. Subhanallah. You have seen videos of those people who are above the law, who we can't talk about. You saw them spitting on Christians whose only sin was that they wanted to go to the church. Spitting on them. How do the international community respond to such hatred? Yeah, they kiss their asses even more and send them more aid to help them with their ethnic cleansing.
That is the right thing. Are you Jewish? Do you want to honor God? That is the godly thing to do. We respect one another.
The godly thing to do is to kill you.
The godly thing is to kill me.
That's right.
Yes?
That's what the Torah says.
The Torah says to kill us.
The Torah says that people who worship idols such as yourself, when there is a Sanhedrin,
To kill us.
yes,
Okay.
that's what the Torah
So
says.
we know how the Jewish people feel about Christians, yes? That you
Christians
discriminate
are-
against Christians.
Christians are idol
You
worshippers.
discriminate
The
against
Torah
Christians.
says that Christianity is idol worship.
Let me-
Oh, you want to kill us? Good, let us send you more weapons and hide your crimes even more in our media. And then, after all of this hypocrisy, they come to us Muslims and ask us, why don't you become more tolerant towards Christians? Subhanallah. Let me tell you a funny story before I go. There was a verse in the Quran that I could not imagine for a lot of years. The verse was talking about the people of Lot when they said about the believers, evict them from our city. Indeed, they are men who keep themselves clean. I was wondering, why would anyone hate people who kept themselves clean? I couldn't imagine anyone saying that or doing that until I found this.
A French company put up a notice on their bathrooms targeting Muslim employees. Attention all toilet users. It is normal in France to wipe oneself with toilet paper and then wash hands with soap. Using hands to wipe oneself and then washing them under running water from a plastic bottle is totally contrary to the basic rules of hygiene, which are in place in this business. Therefore, the first person caught entering the toilet with a plastic bottle or container filled with water will be severely sanctioned. 1/3 of French people don't wash their hands after going to the restroom, and less than half before eating. Only 57% of the French shower daily, and about 8% shower once in every 4 days, or less. It seems that the modern and highly advanced nations of the West could learn something that Muslims have known for the last 1,500 years. Or is cleanliness just another aspect of Muslim backwardness?
We're not done. We still have a lot to talk about. We need to discuss Western media. Why do they portray Muslims as those cartoonish, exploding, women-hating, backward idiots? What are their motives behind this dehumanization? We still have to talk about those militant groups that did terrorism in the name of Islam. Who made them and why are they doing that, and do they represent Islam or not? This is why I invite you to watch part 3 of this series, Violence and Jihad in Islam. Link is in the description. But wait, before you go, first listen to some Quran with me. Salam alaikum.
واتل ما أوحي إليك من كتاب ربك لا مبدل لكلماته ولن تجد من دونه ملتحدا واصبر نفسك مع الذين يدعون ربهم بالغداة والعشي يريدون وجهه ولا تعد عيناك عنهم تريد زينة الحياة الدنيا ولا تطع من أغفلنا قلبه عن ذكرنا واتبع هواه وكان أمره فرطا وقل الحق من ربكم فمن شاء فليؤمن ومن شاء فليكفر إنا أعتدنا للظالمين نارا أحاط بهم سرادقها وإن يستغيثوا يغاثوا بماء كالمهل يشوي الوجوه بئس الشراب وساءت مرتفقا إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات إنا لا نضيع أجر من أحسن عملا أولئك لهم جنات عدن تجري من تحتهم الأنهار يحلون فيها من أساور من ذهب ويلبسون ثيابا خضرا من سندس وإستبرق متكئين فيها على الأرائك نعم الثواب وحسنت مرتفقا